everybody. Today is April 7th. It is 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in East Tennessee. So let's start with some news. There's some breaking news tonight. So let's jump right in and we'll get to it. All right. If you didn't know, breaking Supreme Court sides with the Trump administration on the Alien Enemies Act. Tonight's decision is a landmark victory for the rule of law. An activist judge in Washington, D.C. does not have the jurisdiction to seize control of President Trump's authority to conduct foreign policy and keep the American people safe. The Department of Justice will continue fighting in court to make America safe. That's absolutely true. Okay. See, one of the arguments I've been hearing is that you can deport these people. Maybe they haven't been convicted of a crime. First of all, if someone's here illegally, it falls under the auspices of the executive branch. And the founding fathers put that power, the head of the executive branch, in the president because he's the only one elected. Hence, anybody below him in that executive authority works the behest of the president of the United States. And he sets policy. So, yes, someone's here, you get a car accident or something, you steal something, we're going to give you due process and everything, and you're going to have those constitutional rights if it involves charging somebody, being incarcerated, fined, etc. That's not what's going on. This is deporting. Someone here illegally, they're going to be deported. Now, the Alien Enemies Act allows, because these people are, particularly the Venezuelan gangs, or any gangs for that matter, are part of an organized group that took advantage of our laws, and among other things, and problems with the Biden administration, and came in to conduct illegal activity. Okay? And they're not being charged with a crime. They are being deported. Now, maybe a few are, but they're being deported because of their association. They're not going to be incarcerated. They're going to be detained and deported. That is the difference here. Okay? And how do you identify them? It's not hard. Come on. Between intelligence, we know, like we didn't know John Gotti was the head of the Gambino crime family, even though he wasn't convicted of a crime. Okay? You work with the foreign governments, where these people came from, their activities, they're known on there. And again, it is not the same standard because you're not charging them with a crime. You are deporting them. And the Alien Enemies Act allows the president to clear out the nation of these violent and criminal groups, okay, which he has the power to do. Say, let's get them out because of these multiple gangs from multiple locations we know are conducting an activity. Let's just deport them. They're here illegally. And that is his constitutional power and right. And the Supreme Court ruled today that whatever the guy's name, Judge I think Boasberg, was wrong, as usual, because he's just a left-wing hack in a black robe, okay, was wrong. And it was 5-4 because, of course, the ever-disappointing, although some people warned us about, Miss Amy Coney Barrett voted with the liberals in this case. So, but at least Kavanaugh and Roberts did the right thing. So that's good news. That's good precedent because he can use that, apply it to other gangs and other groups to get this going because that's who you want out first. Excuse me. So, moving on. Boom! Another court win. Look at this. Breaking. Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals just ruled in favor of Doge. They are now able to access information within the Department of Interior. Now imagine that. Again, going back to my prior argument. The president, all the power in the executive branch rests with the president of the United States because he is the one who is elected and in that branch, and he is the one who is accountable to the people. Okay? Doge and other positions before, like any commission or any group, is going through efficiency. Okay? And if the president wants access to this information as he is the head of the executive branch and the Interior Department is a cabinet department in the executive branch, he has the right to do it. And he appointed people to do it on his behalf. Again, completely constitutional. Only left-wing lawyers in a black robe with ideological purposes can come up with some precedent or this act or procedures act and all this to skirt around the most obvious things in the United States Constitution. Of course, he has access to it. He wants to know his department is run, just as a CEO would want to know his department head in certain companies would want to know how it's run. End of story. President says, I want access to information. He's not reversing any constitutional law signed by him or any other president. He's getting access to their systems. Again, good precedent, common sense. Okay, but again, they knew these were going to happen. It's just delay tactics to push it out so they can't get this. Okay, but since Congress is dragging their feet and they come across fraud, it gives them more time. Maybe if the Republicans can get their act together, codify these things and these cuts and these problems in there. So, two good news tonight. So that's good. Moving on. Breaking. North Carolina Appeals Court has ordered a recount in last year's contested state Supreme Court race. Republican candidate Judge Jefferson Griffin challenged over 65,000 ballots, with Democrat Justice Allison Riggs leading by just 734 votes out of 5 million. The State Board of Election must now verify thousands of voters' identities. In a close race like this, you should anyway. I don't know the particulars of this race, if there are any accusations of fraud, whatever. I will tell you one thing that probably came into play. I bet you on the ballot, this race was below the governor's race. So when Trump won North Carolina by whatever it was, 4 points, people jumped on, and then there was that huge break off because a lot of Trump voters did not vote for Robertson. And then once when they're on that line, they're like, oh, let me stay on the D line. Maybe they'll jump in to Congress. They went back to Congress for the Republican line, but they probably didn't follow with the presidential race and the governor's race and all those other races that get more attention, more money spent on. That's probably what happened here. But here's the deal. When a race, 5 million votes, 734, definitely minimum should be a recount. Remember, a recount is just counting the existing ballots as is. That's a recount. Okay. What they're going to have to do is verify the ballots if there are specific challenges. Now, having sat on recounts myself before, I will tell you, the signature's off. We challenge it. They challenge it. Believe me, both parties do it. It's a common practice. That's just one example. But you got to verify. When it's this close, you got to make sure, this address goes to, this is an empty lot. This is a 92-year-old person in a nursing home. This is what's going on here. This doesn't look like the signature. So it sounds like this is the route they're going to go down. And that'll be more accurate than a simple recount. Recount is just counting the same ballots you have. But if there's any kind of problems, like I said, I don't know the specifics of this particular case because I didn't do a deep dive in it, read much about it. But it's good to see that eventually. Remember, North Carolina was the state that threw out a congressional election because a volunteer collected 113 ballots for someone. Probably didn't even know it was illegal. Okay, and they threw out a whole congressional race. The Republican won. And then when they redid it, the Republican actually won by a bigger margin next time. So it's nice to see at least these things don't go one way all the time. So also, on the election front, here we go. Abbott announces November 4th special election for Texas 18. That is a deep Democrat district. It is now vacant, and I believe due to death. And the Abbott says they're going to have the election, basically general election this year. Okay, so that is going to help the Republicans in the House because that'll give them until the November 4th special election, which takes place on that first Tuesday, general election day. So most states, and you're supposed to do with a vacancy for House, Senate, you're appointed, but House by the governor. And in the House, they have up until the next general election to have it. So that's good because especially with Stefanik not taking the UN job, she'll hold her seats, us winning the 2 Florida specials. And now Democrats will be one less there to give a little extra wiggle room for maybe this one big, beautiful bill or whatever the Congress comes up with. But we'll see. But I also put the posts on here because it was interesting. I want to go to the second one from Jam Band Degenerate or whatever this guy is. Total bullshit and abuse of power by the pussy in a wheelchair. First of all, Class A is going on Crockett. Like, what is the wheelchair? Now, if you ever did insulting from the right, oh my God, it's the end of the world. But he can do it, or she can do it. who knows by this handle. And then abuse of power. No, that's the codified law, and that's how it works. And if you don't think the Democrats do that, of course they do. The Democrats freaking keep off third party candidates. Democrats will run a third party candidate, as they did in Wisconsin, okay, pretending he was MAGA and was funded by liberal left wing PACs to take votes away from Hove Day. Okay, of course, if it benefited them, they would delay election. If it benefited them, they'll have it tomorrow. So don't give me this abuse of power, especially it's not, because that's the law. So I thought I'd throw that in there as well. So let's go back to what everybody's talking about here, the tariffs. Breaking, Treasury Secretary Bessent says around 70 countries have called President Trump to negotiate following tariffs. Well, of course. Of course they're going to. That's one of the points. That's one of the goals. Let's see what we can come up with. Okay, can you get rid of A, B, and C? Can you get rid of this quota? Can you lower it down to this? Maybe we'll come down a little bit, like Vietnam at 46%. Maybe we get rid of this and that, we can get it down to 25. But I still think the end game here is adjusting and realizing the failures of the globalist economic system and trying to reindustrialize and bring back at least a chunk of the manufacturing base. So I don't think these tariffs are going away. You know what I mean? We're not going back to where we were 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean? So, but that's a decent sign that they're reaching out and willing to talk. So as we go on that front, I brought up the 2-year Treasury yield, but this was the 10-year. And if you know, the 10-year is tied to the 30-year mortgage. Okay, so boom. So the 10-year note yield plus 30-day. Okay, so the yield, okay, while it was down, started to creep back up a little bit. Okay, that's because the market started to recover. So, but it shows you how volatile it is. So if the markets are coming down that hard and we can get these, whatever, and Besson was talking about this, if we can get these yields down, prices down, almost like a deflationary effect, because of the market being so inflated. Okay. Plus, you got to remember, a lot of these institutions are freeing up cash because they need to increase their liquidity due to the reduction of these assets that they're holding. Okay, so you can get some sort of minor deflationary effect here, which I think would be a pretty good thing. But at the end of the game is you really want to get these interest rates. But if they're going to fluctuate like this with the market so in tune, it's almost like they're not as wide, of course, but on the chart it looks the same because the numbers are not as big. But overall it's kind of halted and flattened, which is a good thing because we really want to get the interest rates down. Because remember, we're also refinancing $9 trillion of debt at higher rates than were issued between 2020, the COVID debacle, the American Rescue Plan, and the Inflation Increase Act. Those last two acts under Biden administration. So we'll see how this goes, but I think that, we'll still have some volatility in the equity markets as well. Another interesting thing was that now, granted, because their time zones are further east, but our market did much better and pretty flat today compared to other markets that were going down. So, and then you had the swing of it was like a $4.5 trillion swing, not each direction, but total, when they said, oh, Trump's going to do a 90-day pause. And then the market went right up $3 trillion in terms of capitalization. And then, oh, no, it's fake news, back down $2 trillion. And then the markets were flat today because you're also going to get people jumping in and buying opportunities. Okay. If the market is overinflated, which I thought it was anyway, because I've made the argument, it's the price of the units that these companies are going up that's increasing revenues, and they're going to sustain their profits. It's not like they're growing at massive rates and it's some economic boom that's fueling the market. It's the inflation of the assets. So I always thought it was a little overbought anyway. But if you But these tariffs, you got to think if 10% there, let's just say it's a 10% effect on prices. It's not, because we know that, and I think it was Besson even said in the interview, he says during the last tariffs on China, Trump, we saw the consumer saw an average 0.7 increase. Well, with domestic inflation down, no one even noticed with 0.7. So it's not a point for point. Oh, you put a 10% tariff, that car is now up 10%. It doesn't work that way. So, but I think the key is to get these one of the key things is to get these rates down, make the tax cuts permanent, deregulation, try to reindustrialize a little bit, bring back some of the factories, and really get this economy on a strong long-term footing that's more tangible and less over, and not as over financialized that is right now. Okay, one of the things is going to be rates, but we can't have huge volatile rates up like this. We want it to go back down like the 2-year the other day when the markets were down. But, so we'll move on there. So as we go on with the tariffs, if my last video I brought up van der Leyen saying we're retaliate. Now we offer 0 for 0 tariffs. So they're willing, and again, I said in my last video, they're more scared than we are. That tells you something. Okay, so if they're willing, they're having massive protective tariffs. Okay, throw on the VAT, which Navarro has made a point about that. Okay, if they're willing to put their protective tariffs off and don't protect their industry as much, that tells you if they're willing to take that risk, they're more afraid of the Trump's tariffs then. That means they know it is not fair to the American consumer, American business, and the American economy how the imbalance is, because the imbalance is not designed because of supply and demand on some, economic footing. It is the imbalance is due to tariffs, non-tariff barriers, and other domestic factors like VAT tax and things like that. So now she's ready to negotiate. How much I love her, the queen unelected leader of the European Commission. All right, so still on the tariff front, there's a Senate bill attempted to block Trump's tariffs. Okay, the Senate bill to slap limits on the president's tariff power now has 7 Republican sponsors per NBC. Grassley, not surprised, Iowa, farming, big agri. Moran, Kansas, same thing. Murkowski, Rhino. McConnell, jerk. Tillis, Rhino, globalist, scumbag. Young, just what I said. And Collins, another Rhino. So I'm not surprised about this. But here's the deal. If you get every Democrat, you get 7. It would have to come up to a vote. You have to stop it from being filibustered and whatever. And even still, then if Trump vetoes it, it's got to be overridden. Okay, because of course he's going to veto it. He's not going to limit himself, right? And you don't have the House to vote for it. So all these guys are doing is just pissing off Trump because it's not going to happen anyway. Or they're showing their big corporate donors, look, I'm trying. Okay, and it's not going to work because, like I said, there's a portion of these tariffs that are definitely negotiation tactics. They're very targeted on specific countries. That's why you have the flat rate at 10. It's based on trade imbalances. And then you have the other tariffs like Vietnam, 46%. That's a very specific number. So you can work on these specific numbers, but keep a baseline tariffs to continue to reindustrialize. Okay. And money and capital flowing in the United States will also improve balance sheets of banks, free up lending, make another reason to have yields come down. You also want buying prices to go up, as I was saying on the last chart, because that'll also bring down yields. Okay. And when we all know the long-term bonds, because the yield curve has been relatively flat, because people aren't taking the risk of buying the longer bonds. Okay, so if we get more stability, maybe they'll be more willing to do that, also bring down rates. Okay, and I'm telling you, prices will drop this, especially relatively to domestic income growth. All right, so now we did a little tariffs with Europe. Let's just go straight to Europe. We all know LePen. It was locked up. So not really, I believe she's at house arrest. But poll came out with her since the last poll by this group. and LePen went up 5 points. Now, this is time. Macron has to call a president. Basically, has to be an election before 2027. So we got time, but it shows you where they're at. And because there's also could be other elections, because that coalition government in France is extremely unstable and it is a minority coalition, basically. So it's that. Now, if Le Pen really still can't run, well, who's next up online right now? Well, that's Bardella, the young dude. Boom! Everybody else is about the same, and Bardella only zero point 0.5 behind Le Pen. That's probably just name ID or something. So that means, let's just say it is 2027 summer. This guy's got 2 years to polish up, to really hammer down policy and get there. Or maybe they find more of a senior statesman or something in the national rally to do this. So just wanted to show you where they at that, and there've been protests and everything in France about this, whatever, and it's gonna have a backlash, just like what happened with Trump and Mar-a-Lago and the indictments and the BS and everything like that. So, all right. So last thing I wanted to talk about, a little update on Ukraine. There are a couple of villages taken in Donetsk, a lot of activity in Zaporozhye region going on in the south as well. People have been talking about possible offensive. I brought that. There's been massive missile strikes of late, massive. But here's a little village, and I thought this was key is because Sumy is where the Kursk region is, which there's I think only 2 villages left that Ukraine holds in Kursk. And this village called Badavka was taken by the Russians, and it was a hub. And it's right near that highway to reinforce the Kursk thing. So it was a supply hub for the Ukrainians there. So they clearly targeted this to just get the rest of the Ukrainians out. And Putin has ordered a buffer. So he's going to link up the line once Kursk is the Ukrainians are completely kicked out of Kursk, meet up with the Sunni forces, and then they're going to push southwest along this line because Sumy and Kursk border each other. And then here's the highway right through there. So I just wanted to give you an update on the whole battlefront, what happened over the weekend in Ukraine. But yeah, so listen, we're gonna get volatility because of these tariffs, because you're gonna get tit for tat. China looks like they're gonna reject it, so you're looking at, you know, because they slapped the 34. Trump says he's gonna slap another 50, and they're not going to go down. So it looks like Trump will do the other 50. I'm sure he's not going to back down if the Chinese don't back down. So the markets are going to react to this all the time, and then we'll have the volatility that I showed you with the 10-year, which was inverse of the 2-year, which was good. One was kind of went the other way, but at least it wasn't huge in terms of basis point amounts. But the quickness of the shift, the intense volatility, and we're going to get that for it. But these huge corporations that are multinational, where we overseas, they're not going to take that huge hit that people think that warrants a 30% drop in the equities market. But what we can do, it can help lower inflation. It can do a lot of things, especially if we reindustrialize, come up with some good ideas. I meant good, compromises with specific countries on specific things. Keep that baseline, because Trump said it is about 2 years to really get not just the investments, but some of these factories back and things like that. All right, at very minimum, shorten the supply chain, right? If you shorten the supply chain, right, your insurance will go down for the shipping costs. You're not paying as much for fuel for the shipping costs, the crews that have to be on the boats. Okay, all these things that well, it's cheaper labor there, but there's a lot of expensive things. This part from this country, this part from this country, then we assemble it here. All this nonsense going on like a web, So do that. Keep an eye on the Ukraine war. See if that major offensive is launched by the Russians in the Sumy and Zaporozhye region. Some of those political news, court cases, see how that goes and so forth. See if the House leaks more stuff. Senate's, we know Trump kind of like the Senate plan now. He first liked the House, then the Senate plan. So we'll see what happens there. But, and some of those going on in that North Carolina court case and with the recount. We'll see what happens with that. But that's my first video of the week. I'll be on X and Getter. You can follow me on X at PatriotPlanner1, on Getter at PatriotPlanner. And if you like the video, please follow, like, and share. All right. Thanks a lot, and have a good evening.